Welcome to another installment of Biology in the Basement, special edition rock and roll, right? I got my Fender shirt on, had to play my bass for you. Wasn't that pretty awesome? Oh, okay, so you didn't like that. Sorry about that. Well, at least give it up for Bonesy. Well, you know me, always trying to do something different to spice up these videos a little bit, hoping will increase our viewership as the craziness continues. So be prepared for bass intros all week long. So the purpose of this video is to just go over the first parts of the immune system and then continue on with what is called how we acquire immunity. Immunity to be protected against specific pathogens. That's what immunity is. We're going to talk about that and just look at it in the big picture and how we get it. But of course, we must have a fact of the day so that we can get started. And that one is, this one's interesting. You'll find this interesting because I'm calling it now. This is going to be your next Netflix binge series. There was something called the Bone Wars in the late 1800s. There were two rival paleontologists sought to disgrace each other, resorting to bribery, theft, attempts to cut off funding, and destruction of bones. Both paleontologists were ruined financially, but their efforts led to the discovery of 136 new species of dinosaurs. So they did some good there in the discovery of dinosaurs, but it sounds a lot like the Tiger King, if you ask me. So I'm calling it now. This is going to be our Netflix binge series next year when they run out of things to talk about. So here we go. The immune system, as I said, starts in the bone marrow, gives you these white blood cells, sends them to training camps so that they can fight different types of diseases, whether they are from pathogens or infected items. We've already focused on the genetic disorders when we were in genetics, so we're focusing more on the pathogen side right now. The viruses, protists, things like this, these infectious agents that are trying to get into us, either in the air, infected items, or through other animals. And we must social distance. That was just a subliminal message. Then we got into the lines of defense. This was always one of my favorite lectures, and this makes me miss you guys a lot, just so you know. I used to go crazy. I'd be like, name the greatest castle that you could imagine with the best defenses, and they'd be like, it's got this. Oh, we're better than that. It's got that. Oh, we're better than that. It's got this. We're better than that, and I'd be like, we've got tough walls. We've got sharks with laser beams in them. We've got the best fortress that you can imagine, through our skin, our sweat, our tears. Like I said, this lysozyme is an enzyme which is the equivalent of sharks with laser beams in the moat of all the fluids of your body, right? We have openings where there is no skin covering, and so we have all kinds of moat-like protectors. Well, what about special forces and all kinds of cool things? Dude, we got that too, right? We have the second line of defense where we bring in these big bruisers, right? These white blood cells, macro, right? Large cells. They're coming in and they're just gobbling up anything, right? We're quarantining. We're even turning up the heat, right? Imagine running through the halls trying to attack and there's just flames everywhere, or they're just releasing poison gases. Whatever it is, they are making the conditions very difficult for any pathogens that have made it through the first line of defense to spread any further, right? Because as it says here, the goal of the second line of defense is to keep it from spreading. And we use the term inflammation to describe those guys coming in and attacking with the big guns. Of course, There are times where our system is overtaken, right? The big thing now that they're talking about with COVID is take care of yourself, right? If you have too much body fat, if you smoke, if you drink, if you do anything, if you're stressed out, relax. All of those things can also weaken your immune system, right? And so whether it's just outside factors or you just get a heavy dose coughed on you, we show this really nasty video of British guys throwing darts, and during one of the scenes, the guy just goes and sneezes on him, and then they shake hands, and you're just like, oh, or like repulsed. But fortunately, we don't get to watch that video. But there's any ways that we can get overwhelmed where we have to kick in the third line of defense, and we go specific. And we are going specifically for the antigens on the cell surface, right? Because there's going to be a group of all the same cells that are infecting our body, right? This coronavirus, say, has the same cell surfaces. So we're looking for those receptors, or whether it's a bacterial infection, they have a specific receptor on them. And so we're going after those specific cells that are in our body. And we can do this through different ways, right? And those receptors, of course, we call antigens. So when we are overwhelmed, we go two basic routes. One is the cell-mediated immunity. I liken that to the zombie infection, where if you've been bit by a zombie, there's only one path for you, and that is to take a shot to the head so that you don't infect anybody else. And we have killer T cells whose job is to kill infected cells so they don't infect other cells, and they stop producing viral particles. Usually is when we use our cell-mediated, is when we have cells that have been overtaken by viruses and they're just producing virus particles. That's no good for the body, so killer T cells, take them out, right? Then we have humoral immunity, where we have B cells, right? These are killer T cells. Down here, humoral immunity is when it's focused more in the blood or the fluids, and we will have B cells create antibodies. Antibodies are not cells. They are considered proteins that bind to the antigens, right? Just like we did the blood lab, right? We looked at the antigens on the blood and we mixed certain antibodies with them. And if they clumped together, then we knew they were the same match, right? And so that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to find antibodies that will be able to fit like a lock and key to this specific antigen. And that's what our B cells do. They create these specific antibodies to find those specific pathogens, to bind them up. Please watch that video, the Kyrgyzstan, or however you pronounce it, video. It's so awesome. It breaks it all down about how this part works. So like I said, right, we get an infection, we make B cells that create antibodies, they bind to the pathogens, enable them, white blood cell comes by and gobbles them up. Over on this side, this is where we have cells that have been infected. They shoot out usually interferons, as they're called, another type of protein that says, hey, we're under attack, luring killer T cells to them to pop these cells, right? Lysis of that infected cell will result. So, how do we get immunity? There's a few different ways. Okay, this is really the last section and the most important section, especially now. Active immunity is where your body actively takes on the pathogen itself, where we kick on the immune response, right, where one of these two steps happen, and we create the antibodies, or we have the killer T cells that exist that are ready to take out this pathogen once it returns, right? They're trying to talk about COVID passports, right, where, hey, I've already got COVID-19, I've already got the antibodies in my blood, I can't get it, so I should be able to go out in the world, right? And they're like, well, you still can kind of spread it maybe. So they're a little nervous about that, but right, that's one way is you get coughed on, you get sneezed on, your body goes through the process, right, and makes the antibodies and is ready to go. Okay? That's the good old fashioned way, and that's what we do every time we get a cold or the flu or whatever. This is usually what happens. Excuse me, don't worry, I'm okay. The other way is when we don't want to get that disease because it is fatal. There have been many diseases like measles, mumps, rubella, tetanus, whooping cough, also known as what, diphtheria, um, and oh no, pertussis, and then diphtheria, um, as well as now you guys have the chickenpox vaccine. And so you don't want to get these diseases in the full dose because many times it's fatal. And so what we do is we've invented the vaccine. Now it's very important for you guys to understand a vaccine, so listen closely. A vaccine is actually an injection, or nowadays you can get the nasal spray, of the pathogen itself. It's either in a weakened, a dead, or just part of that pathogen. They give you the smallest amount possible, right? That's what they're doing right now, is they're finding out what is it that we can inject into a person that is the smallest amount possible that will stimulate the active immunity response, the immune response, excuse me, so that you will make the antibodies without you actually showing much signs of being sick, right? That's how a vaccine works, right? The first few years of your life, you were hit with many vaccines, like the ones that I mentioned, because getting measles, mumps, rubella, all those things are potentially fatal, debilitating, right? FDR had polio, right? And it put him in a wheelchair for the last, quarter or whatever of his life. And so these are very important for you to get vaccinated so that you don't get these diseases. You have all kinds of antibodies and B cells in your blood ready to go in case you are exposed to these things, right? We won't allow you in home or high school without them. And so, to anybody who doesn't believe that vaccines don't work, we are currently living in a world where we are missing one vaccine. Okay, we're all locked in our houses and we're watching all these people get infected and hospitalized because the spread of COVID-19 is so fast that, and somewhat lethal, that it is causing a huge problem, right? So imagine if we didn't have vaccines for any of the major pathogens that run through our system. Our population would be a fraction of what it is. And so we have vaccines to thank for that so that we don't have to get these diseases. And we are hoping that the doctors and medical professionals are working hard to make a coronavirus, COVID-19 specifically, vaccine as quickly as possible so that we can all get back out in the world again. So that is the one way where your body actively does it, either through exposure or through a vaccine. The second one is where you get this through an outside source. There's only two ways this happens. The most common one that's covered in the Regents and 90% of the cases is where mother's milk contains the antibodies that a baby needs, right? A baby is born without much of an immune system. And so luckily, mother's milk provides those antibodies to protect the baby from all this new world filled with microbes. And so a baby is protected, and as it weans off of its mother and its immune system develops, right, then you go through the stage where, I'm out all the time because my kids are sick because they're still fighting off every infection, right? So those are the other ways. that you can get this. But of course, the antibodies didn't come from you, and so this is only short term until your immune system kicks back on. So here's your diagram of a vaccine, right, where they take the smallest amount of the pathogen, they inject it or nasal spray it into your body. Your B cells recognize it, and they create the antibodies to bind to this, and then good old macrophage comes by and just gobbles up this whole thing. So here's your last slide. This is the breakdown of how we get immunity. First one is just your first line of defense, where we are innately protected against certain things because they're too wimpy to make it across this awesome set of defenses that our body has. Then, of course, we get acquired immunity. It can be active, like I've been talking about, just getting coughed on, sneezed on, whatever, or through a vaccine, okay? This is permanent for life. Every once in a while, you may need a booster shot, right? When you guys go to college and stuff like that, you're going to have to get a whole nother round of boosters because you're going to go hang out with a whole bunch of people from all around the world, and you want to be protected. The next one here is when I was talking about passive immunity, where the antibodies themselves are given to you. So it's short term, and it does not last forever until your body kicks in. This is usually just in the case where you can't handle all of the pathogens coming at you. Another example was in the days of post 9/11, they were mailing anthrax in the mail, and anthrax is this bacteria that lives in the soil, and if you were to get it, you would die within like a day or two. And so they were worried all the mail carriers were going to get it. So all the mail carriers were injected directly with the anthrax antibodies that they extracted from cows, because cows live in, dirty soil and are naturally immune to anthrax, but our bodies are not. And so in case they came in contact with anthrax, they would already have the antibodies, but this only lasted for a little while. Luckily, so did that scare, and that's how we get this last form of immunity. So I think that covers everything. We're going to do some wrap up before we talk about the muscular system. So, of course, the last thing that you guys must do are your objectives, 28 through 41. So please do all of these objectives. This will be an assignment. Your document has been shared with me, and so just do these objectives, and I'll just go through all of your copies that you've shared with me already to make sure that they are done. If you want, you can just copy this off of the original document and submit it separately. Either is fine. Okay, well, this is me signing off from Biology in the Basement. Hope you have a good one. Might as well play us out, right?